About 10 to 12 years ago, I lived in a two-bedroom house in England. It was a terraced house, part of a long strip of similar homes lined up along a quiet road. Back in the day, all the attics in these homes were connected. You could literally crawl through one and travel all the way down the row through the connected attic spaces. Eventually, people realized how bad of an idea that was. Fires could spread easily, and it gave burglars a perfect way to move between houses unnoticed. So, at some point, the attics were all bricked up, sealing them off and making each home secure. One night, I was relaxing in the bath when I heard a noise coming from directly above me. I figured it was probably just an animal or something moving around up there, so I didn't think much of it. But then it kept happening. Over the next few weeks, I continued to hear that same noise, but only when I was in the bath or taking a shower. Eventually, I asked a friend to check the attic. He popped his head in, looked around with a flashlight, and didn't see anything unusual. After that, nothing really happened for a month or two. Then one night, I was home alone, getting ready to take a shower before going out with friends. I heard that same noise again, above me, in the attic. But this time, my dog went absolutely crazy. He started barking loudly and stared up at the ceiling, right where I'd heard the sound. That really scared me. I grabbed my stuff and decided to get ready at a friend's house instead. The next day, I was outside when my neighbor called out to me. This neighbor, he's always been a little creepy. He asked if I was okay. I didn't want to be rude, so I just smiled and said, yes, and kept doing what I was doing. But just as I reached my door, he called out again and asked, "Did you get to your friend's place?" At first, I didn't think much of it. I just replied, "Yes, thank you." But then, I paused. How did he know I went to a friend's place? But when I got inside my house, it hit me. How did he know I went to a friend's house? The only way he could have known was if he heard me talking on the phone. And I had been whispering the whole time, because I was so scared the night before. We didn't know and drove off. He was arrested. Much else. The police didn't really tell us anything. The guy we helped seemed off. He said a lot of weird things and even started flirting with me. But at the time, we didn't care, we just wanted to make sure he was okay, even though we barely knew him. That realization sent chills down my spine. I immediately called my family and told my dad what had happened. They all came over to the house. My dad turned on the bathroom light, but kept the other lights in the house off. Then he opened the attic door. That's when we saw them, two tiny lights shining from the top of the attic. There were two small holes in the ceiling, and light was coming through them. My bathroom ceiling was usually dim, so I'd never noticed them before. My dad climbed up into the attic. He was up there for a while. When he came back down, he looked furious. He didn't say a word to us. He just marched straight outside and stormed over to the neighbor's house. We could hear him shouting, telling the neighbor to open the door. But the neighbor wasn't home. Later, I asked my cousin to go up into the attic and check things out. When he came back down, he looked shaken. He told me the wall between the two attics had been broken. Most of the bricks had fallen on my side, meaning someone had broken it from the neighbor's side. We called the police, but they said there was no proof the neighbor had done anything. The neighbor claimed he never went into the attic and blamed the people who lived there before him. But we all knew it was him. After that, I never stayed in that house again. 2 years ago, I moved to the UK to study at university. I had always dreamed of going there, and honestly, I also wanted to get away from my parents. Things at home had been getting really stressful. During my first year, I lived in student accommodation and met some really nice people. I enjoyed being away from family and learning what it meant to be independent. When second year started, I moved into a house with a few friends. It was still managed through student housing, but it felt more private. We had our own space, and we didn't have to worry about being quiet or getting in trouble for having people over, like we did in the small shared flat during first year. My room was on the ground floor. My window looked out onto a small backyard. I used to go out there every day just to get some fresh air. In the backyard, there was a thin wooden door that led to the other side of the street, where people would leave their bins, old furniture, broken chairs, things like that. The door could only be locked from inside the backyard. But because it was so old and flimsy, we had to tie it shut with strings just to keep it from swinging open. We had neighbors on both sides of the house, so we were surrounded by families and other student houses. The neighbors on the right side were 5 men. To be honest, they always seemed a bit strange. Then one day, I met one of those neighbors outside our house because the police had shown up. One of his flatmates had attacked him, and the others, with a sharp object, and had even set their kitchen on fire. I remember hearing people screaming. So my flatmates and I ran outside. One of the men was covered in blood. He had cuts all over his arms and a wound on his head from the attack. We gave him some things to clean himself up and even gave him an old t-shirt to change out of his clothes. A few minutes later, we saw the attacker being taken away by the police. They put him in a. After that incident, I would see him around from time to time. I'd go to university, come back home, and spot him on the street now and then. Then one day, I was walking to the corner shop when he came up to me and started talking in this really weird, uncomfortable way. I didn't respond. I just kept walking. That's when he said something that made my stomach drop. "Oh, that's okay. I'll just wait in front of your house then, and we can talk further." I was seriously creeped out. Still, part of me thought maybe he was just joking. I quickly bought my drink from the shop and walked back toward my street. But when I turned the corner, I saw him, and one of his flatmates, sitting on my doorstep. Just waiting for me. I panicked. I turned around and walked back toward the shop. I called the only guy who lived with us and asked him to open the door and tell them to leave. But of course, he wasn't home. No one else was, either. So I waited near the shop. For nearly an hour. Eventually, they left. As soon as they were gone, I ran back home and locked the front door immediately. Our front door had a glass panel, so you could kind of see who was standing outside. That alone made me feel uneasy after what had happened. After that, I did my best to avoid the guy. And for a while, it worked. But then one day, I went out to the backyard for a smoke, and noticed something strange. The wooden door, which was almost always shut, was wide open. The strings we used to keep it closed, had been cut. For some reason, I didn't think too much of it at the time. I figured maybe one of my flatmates had taken the bins out and forgot to tie the door back properly. So I closed it again and tied a new string. Our neighbors often yelled, screamed, and fought inside their house. It used to wake us up in the middle of the night. But over time, we just got used to it. Then one evening, my boyfriend stayed over, like he usually did. He's the kind of person who never wakes up from noise. But that night, my boyfriend woke up in the middle of the night. He said he'd heard a loud bang, and some whispering. I was fast asleep, but he gently shook me awake. We both stayed very still, lying quietly in the dark, just listening. Then we heard it. The wooden backyard door slammed open. Right after that, we heard footsteps, right outside my window. I always kept my window open at night because it got really warm inside. But now, that window felt like a huge mistake. We froze. Neither of us dared to move. Then we heard someone gently rattling the door that led from the backyard into the house. Like they were testing it. Trying to open it. After a few tense moments, the sound stopped. Thank God the curtains were drawn, they couldn't see us. But we were already planning to grab our things, get dressed, and run out of the room. If they tried to come through the window, we were ready to lock them inside. Then it got worse. We heard the window move. It opened even more. That was it. My boyfriend and I jumped out of bed, grabbed my phone, threw on some clothes, and ran out of the room, and straight out of the house. I called my flatmates right away and told them to lock themselves in their rooms. Then I called the police. Luckily, the station was only a few streets away, and they arrived in less than 5 minutes. The police caught one of the men on the spot. The other tried to run, but they found him a few streets away. I was so confused. I had never done anything to upset them. I wasn't rude. I barely even talked to them. The thought that they tried to break into our house, for who knows what reason, terrified me and my boyfriend. I never heard much more from the police after that. Just that both men had been taken in. A few months later, I moved back home. I was still scared, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The whole experience haunted me for a long time. And I kept thinking about what might have happened, if we hadn't woken up in time. I kept thinking about what could have happened if my boyfriend hadn't woken up that night. Recently, something else happened. It wasn't as intense, but it still gave me a bit of a scare. It was weird, kind of funny too, but in the end, I didn't think much of it. Just to be safe, though, I asked my neighbors to keep an eye out for anything strange around my place. Last night, around midnight, I got a text from the older lady who lives next door. She wrote, "A really tall guy just walked into your basement. Just wanted to let you know." I thanked her, but honestly, I didn't think much of it. It was dark outside. I figured maybe she'd seen something by mistake. At the time, I was sitting at my desk in the basement. The door never opened, no one called out to me, and I was definitely alone down there, like always. About 30 minutes later, she texted again. "The guy just left," she said, "but he didn't go anywhere." That made me pause. I texted her back, asking what she meant. She replied, "Well, he walked out and down where you have your camper." I tried to follow him, but he never came out the other side. And he never came back. Now I started to feel a little uneasy. I thought about what happened the night before and decided to pause my game to look around. There wasn't even the tiniest sign that anyone had been there. I'd been doing a bit of work in the basement, putting up a few drywall panels, adding putty, doing some sanding, but I hadn't cleaned up all the dust yet. There were some footprints in the dust, but they were mine. I recognized the pattern from my Crocs. So unless someone had played "The Floor is Lava," managed not to leave a single new footprint, didn't take anything, and then left silently, it had to have just been me down there. Still, I figured maybe I'd just go hang out at her place for a bit. Maybe it would help me relax, and maybe I could figure out what she actually saw. But there was one problem. I couldn't get the basement door open. Now, the basement door is on the outside of the main part of the house. It doesn't close on its own. It shuts really slowly, so slowly, in fact, that you have to wait a minute or two for it to fully close before you can slide the bolt and lock it. That locking mechanism is all done from the outside. I use a master lock to secure it when I'm not home. The master lock was sitting right next to me, so I knew it wasn't locked. The door must have just gotten stuck or jammed somehow. That had never happened before. I've lived in this house since I was 17. I'm 28 now. My parents sold it to me when they retired. Yeah, I know, I'm super lucky. Especially these days. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Anyway, I didn't think much of the door issue. I figured I'd just climb out one of the basement windows, check out what was going on, and go hang out with the lady next door. Problem solved. So that's exactly what I did. And when I checked the door from the outside, it opened just fine. Then, I hopped my fence and went I went to talk to my neighbor. Summer nights are perfect for that kind of thing. I won't bore you with all the small talk, but basically, she told me she saw a tall guy, tall enough that he had to duck a little to get into the basement, walk up to my door, stand there for a moment, and then just walk right in. She said he was wearing all black, and she couldn't make out any clear details. Then, she asked me if he was cute. I told her to shut the hell up. It was around 1 a.m. by then. She doesn't work and usually hangs out on her porch pretty late, but I didn't want to take up more of her time. So I hopped the fence again, told her good night, and went upstairs. I did my usual routine, checking all the locks, making sure everything was secure. I also tend to walk around a lot when I'm nervous. Probably just a habit. So, I was pacing back and forth in the house for a while. Cleaned a little here and there. Just doing random guy stuff, I guess. Then I heard a huge bang from downstairs. It didn't sound like glass breaking, exactly, I'm not sure how to describe it, but something had definitely fallen or snapped. That's when it hit me, the mantle. It must have tipped over and knocked everything down. So I slipped on my Crocs and headed downstairs to check out the damage. But, everything looked exactly the same. Nothing was broken. Nothing was out of place. The door, though? It was jammed again. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Now, I'm not the strongest guy in the world, and honestly, I don't want to be, but I figured if I pulled hard enough, I should be able to unjam it. Still, it wouldn't move. I grabbed the nearest long tool I could find and tried to use it like a crowbar, wedging it into the metal handle, trying to pry it open. Nothing. I was sweating now. Trying everything I could. Finally, I gave up and took out my phone to call the lady next door, maybe she could come let me out or something. But my phone wouldn't turn on. Now here's the weird part, I always leave it on a wireless charger at my desk, so it's always fully charged. I'd only been away from my desk for maybe 2.5 hours, and I hadn't even touched my phone in that time. There was no way the battery should have been low. Still, I figured I'd charge it up again. I placed it back on the charger. Dead. Completely lifeless. I waited until it got to about 50%, then finally went back upstairs. And this time, the door opened with no problem at all. I haven't been back in the basement since. Not even to grab the master lock and secure the door. I still don't know what really happened that night. Maybe it's something I'll never understand. All I know is, I'm not going back down there anytime soon. His daughter lives to our left, his nephew to our right, his sister a few houses down one way, and his brother a few houses the other way. That kind of thing's not too unusual out here, families tend to stick close. He also said something that really stuck with me. He told me I shouldn't speak to him directly. If we needed anything, my husband should call or talk to his wife instead. Then, like it was the most normal thing in the world, he looked me over and said I should grow my hair longer, that I'd look more motherly. I just smiled and nodded, blaming it on age, on old-fashioned thinking. A few days later, his daughter invited me over for tea. She was nice, always working in her garden, always keeping to herself. I figured maybe she wasn't like the rest. Maybe I'd misjudged her. We talked for a while in the kitchen, but when she left to take a phone call, I moved just a little down the hall. Enough to spot a door at the end. It had 3 locks. The rest of the house was soft and lived in, but this door looked newer, reinforced, like it didn't belong. I stepped closer and noticed deep marks around the frame, scratches. I was staring when she came back and quickly placed herself between me and the hallway. "Oh, that," she said too lightly, "just an old storage room. It's not really safe down there." She smiled. In the morning, I walked past her house and noticed the basement window, one of those tiny ones, barely above ground. Inside the glass was a handprint, small, fresh. I told my husband. He said it was probably just from cleaning or a kid visiting. But it hadn't rained, and the print wasn't smudged. It was pressed against the window, like someone had leaned into it. Another night, tire tracks crossed our field to the barn, and no one admitted to being there. So, we checked our cameras. The footage was gone, not corrupted, just erased. And then, the final straw. I was hanging laundry when I felt someone watching me. I turned and saw him, the old man, standing at the edge of our property. He didn't wave. Didn't speak for a long time. Then, finally, he said 3 words. "Don't dig there." He pointed to a spot near the tree line, then turned and walked away like nothing had happened. I hadn't planned to dig, not until he said that. The next afternoon, after my husband left and the kids were asleep, I took a shovel and walked out to the spot. I don't know what I was expecting, bones, maybe. But what I found was worse. Buried just beneath the surface was an old metal box. I pried it open and froze. Inside were dozens of black and white photographs, curled at the corners. Families, all standing in front of this house. And in every photo, just off to the side, there he was, the old man. I couldn't make sense of it. None of it added up. So, I decided to go straight to his house and ask him what the photos meant. But when I knocked on the door, it wasn't him who answered. His wife opened it. I told her I needed to speak with her husband. That's when her expression changed. Then, she said slowly, "You must be mistaken. The old man passed away around 3 years ago. Everyone wanted to be friendly, so we figured it wasn't a big deal. But after a while, we began hearing strange noises from his apartment at night, dragging sounds and footsteps that seemed to pace back and forth. We told ourselves it was probably nothing, but it just kept happening. Then one day, my roommate came home and found him standing in the hallway, directly facing our front door. He didn't move or say anything when she said hi to him. He just slowly turned and walked back into his apartment. Things got worse from there. Soon, we started getting ring notifications late at night, usually between 1 and 3 a.m. When we checked the footage, we'd see him walking slowly past our door. Sometimes, he'd stop and stand there, staring without saying a word. Then, one morning, we noticed something new, deep scratches on our front door, like someone had taken a key and dragged it across the surface. We were freaked out. We reported it to the leasing office and even showed them the video footage, but all they said was, "Let us know if anything else happens." It felt like no one was going to help us unless things got really bad. We started locking the door twice, keeping a chair in front of it at night, and carrying pepper spray. It was about 1:30 a.m. when we were woken up by loud banging on our door. I grabbed my phone and opened the Ring app. He was standing there, shirtless, staring into the peephole like he could see right through it. Then he started whispering something we couldn't make out. Suddenly, he screamed. I called 911 with shaking hands. The operator stayed on the line while we hid in the corner of our room. After some time, the police arrived, but by then, everything was quiet again. The officers knocked on his door, but he didn't answer. They told us, "We can't really do anything unless he actually breaks in or hurts someone." We didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, we didn't even talk about it, we just started packing. We didn't even wait for the lease to end. We left. Later that day, we filed another police report, but nothing came of it. Nothing ever did. We never found out why he acted that way. We never learned his name. And honestly, I don't want to. What I do know is this: we trusted our gut, and we got out that night. We chose ourselves, and that choice may have saved our lives.